Hi everyone, Oksana here. So let me know that you can hear me well. And I'm going to tag Barry in this video because Barry really wanted to see this class. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on this presentation. So this presentation is about the stomach acid and how everything works in there in digestion. So this is going to be a short presentation, but this is basically when you walk along the stomach, you will fall into the holes here, and when you fall into these holes here, they're going to be called gastric pits. And then the bottom of this pits is gastric glands. So these are gastric pits. That's what basically your stomach looks like when you walk around it. And the stomach, it's responsible for digestion and food storage. So stomach has a cardiac stomach portion of it that is a close proximity to the heart. Then there is a fundic portion, which is a major storage region, is right here of the stomach. And then we have the corpus body region and the florus region that's found here that opens up into the duodenum or your small intestine. And looking in this type, this is what the surface of the stomach, and then these are all the glands that are found in the stomach. So gastric pits, this is a gastric pit, which means the opening. It opens into the gastric gland. So this entire portion is called gastric gland. And gastric pit is an opening, and gland is basically a tube itself that has cells that secrete substances into the lumen of the gland that will travel into the lumen of the stomach. So this is the lumen of the gland, and all these cells, they secrete substances. They will travel into the lumen of the stomach. So this is the lumen of the stomach. And when the endocrine hormones are secreted from here, they go the opposite direction and they go into the blood. So the tube secretes endocrine hormones. They go into the blood and circulate through the circulatory system and go back and have the effect in the stomach. And so we have also unicellular cells here, endocrine glands in the stomach. These are single cells that act like endocrine glands. So some are found in the gastric pits, and some of them are found in the crypts in the small intestine. So when you look at the body of the stomach, you will have epithelial cells. This is the body of the stomach. It will have epithelial cells that are simple columnar, secrete mucus. And so epithelial cells, there's no cilia, there's no goblet cell, but these are the surface lining cells that secrete gel-like mucus that doesn't become soluble. So what that means is these cells, they secrete this mucus, which is a gel-like mucus, and it doesn't mix with the chyme or the food. So it stays on the surface of the stomach. So what's dissolved in this mucus is bicarbonate ion that's dissolved in it. And the gel-like layer on the surface of the small intestine, it's a buffer that contains a lot of bicarbonate ion. So when proton that's in your stomach gets dissolved in the mucus, bicarbonate ion binds to it and neutralizes the buffer. That's why you can't auto-digest your stomach. So stomach acid at times between digestion is around at pH 2. The stomach doesn't digest itself because of the mucus barrier. So your mucus in the stomach protects your stomach from digesting itself. And what happens that if you pump too much proton into the lumen of the stomach barrier, that's what happened in your case. You went through a proton pump. What happens that if you pump too much proton into the lumen of the stomach, you're dealing with the problem with the equilibrium, which is overriding the buffer, and acid is degrading simple columnous epithelial, and then you get to the laminal propria with the blood vessels and get bleeding in the stomach. This can happen when you produce too much acid from parietal cells. And also bacterial cells can degrade this lining. So that's what happens when you have too much proton gets pumped in your stomach. You degrade all these layers in your stomach, and that's what causes gastritis. Does this make sense? So going a little bit about to explain what each of these cells do. So you have these parietal cells that's found in the glands, in the gastric gland. These parietal cells, they secrete hydrochloric acid. So what they secrete is the proton, which is H portion of that. So H is a proton, and Cl or ion, so chlorine ion. So parietal cells, they secrete hydrochloric acid, and they also secrete gastric intrinsic factor. And what gastric intrinsic factor is responsible for is that it binds vitamin B12 and it carries it from the stomach to the small intestine and facilitates absorption of it. So if you don't produce gastric intrinsic factor, you'll have permissive anemia, because B12 is an essential coenzyme for red blood cell formation. So that's what so parietal cells, what they do is it secrete hydrochloric acid, and they also secrete gastric intrinsic factor that binds vitamin B12 and carries it from the stomach to the small intestine, where it is absorbed. That's why these cells are so important. And also you have chief cells. And chief cells, these are the ones that you see in orange here. They produce zymogen, pepsinogen, proteolytic enzyme, and that's an active enzyme. And hydrochloric acid causes this enzyme, pepsinogen, to cleave itself and convert to an active form called pepsin. And now you can chew up some polypeptides. And also you have endopeptidase that cuts up internal peptide bonds. In addition, chief cells, they also secrete gastric lipase. So some fat digestion occurs in the stomach because of this enzyme. And in fetal and infant stomach, chief cells also secrete rennin that causes coagulation of milk protein, and it slows down the movement of protein through the stomach and facilitates its digestion. And in humans, our chief cells don't secrete rennin anymore. But in the babies, chief cells also secrete rennin that helps you coagulate milk protein. That's why after age of 3, humans are not supposed to be consuming milk from cow, because you no longer have that enzyme that helps you coagulate milk. Does this make sense? In addition, we also have, so we talked about parietal cells, we talked about chief cells, and now we're going to talk about enteroendocrine cells. So these are enteroendocrine cells, and so these are small cells, and what that means is that these are neurocrine cells and endocrine cells. And they're stimulated by enteric nervous system. And so endocrine, what that means is basically it secretes hormones into the blood. So these cells, they secrete hormones into the blood. And also paracrine, it means that these hormones that's secreted, they stay in the connective tissue and affect neighboring cells. That's what it means, enteroendocrine cells. So these are the hormones, and they also paracrine, which means they affect your neighboring cells. And gastric can affect the cells in the gastric pit, but generally it will be dumped into the blood, but you can prevent it from getting to the blood. So basically, these are different types of cells that are found in your stomach. And let me know if you have any questions about that.